So, unless you've been living under a rock, you probably know by now that Edward Newgate has been assassinated. They have reduced 9-cost Newgate to 1 copy per deck. They've reduced Marco, 4-cost Marco, to 1 copy per deck. And they've reduced Radical Beam to 1 copy per deck. Now, this only affects the English metagame, and depending on what kind of player you are in this game, you probably fall into one of 3 camps. The first is the group of players that are rejoicing to the gods that they have made a swift restriction to some of the most over-centralizing and overbearing gatekeepers in any game ever. And now you might be able to enjoy your Sanji deck. Group B, you are that Newgate player that is sitting in the corner of your room in the field position, rocking back and forth with your alternate art leader Newgate, telling yourself that it's going to be fine. Everything's going to be okay. And to you, my condolences. The third type of player is the cynic, the one that says, you know what? This was not enough. We should have had an outright ban of all red leaders except for Uta. And we should get rid of the Rush Zoro and every other card that is good in red, because that archetype is just way too good. Too much power for one color. And to you, you're not completely wrong, but red is still healthy for the game, in my personal opinion. And most of the Straw Hats are red, so good luck with that, buddy. But for all of the rest of the people out there, the normal people that just want to play this game at a competitive level, this is for you. We are going to be doing some tier list predictions here with this new metagame coming out of these restricted lists. We're going to go through all of the decks that I think are relevant, and some of them I'll go through faster, and if I kind of skip over it, well, I don't think it's that good of a deck. I'm sorry, not sorry. It's just what I think. This is me talking about the highest level of competitive play, which is not that high because this is still a very early game. These are my personal opinions. So, without further ado, right into the tier list. We will start with Edward Newgate. Now, Edward Newgate is definitely the most affected leader in this list, and the reason why is because he had probably the most consistent deck imaginable. We had 4 Ezo, 4 of the Whitebeard Pirates, all Whitebeard Pirate targets. You had 4 Newgate that was very easy to get 3 in hand and just drop a Newgate after a Newgate after a Newgate. And when you hit that +8, when you get to an 8k leader, it is just so hard. There's so many decks that just gatekeeps because there's nothing that they can do and they just lose. So this leader was cracked. It was absolutely cracked. It still is pretty good. I think Edward Newgate is probably going to fall in either high B tier or low A tier. It's going to be different. They probably will still run the single Marco, and they probably will still run the single Newgate because those cards are just too good to not include. They'll probably still run the single copy of Radical Beam because if they get it, they get it. They get 2 draws per turn, people. But it's going to change how the deck looks. Instead of being able to reliably stabilize with a couple life, they might be they will be a lot more aggressive. I'm seeing a higher count in aces in their future, possibly throwing in some Rush Luffy and trying to go kind of more into that Strawbeard builds that we saw in OP-02. And I think the concept is going to be shifting to more of a let's rush down the opponents and get damage on the board as fast as possible. We're still a 6k body as a leader, which is just so frustrating to deal with for so many decks. And with 8 searchers, we're still going to be able to see our Newgate. So we'll be able to drop a single one, but the goal will now shift to trying to close the game right after dropping the first, because it's our first and only. We might even see some Shanks thrown in there because it is a powerful rush that can complement the Rush Luffy and the Rush Ace. But yeah, we'll see how this deck evolves. There is a lot of room for this deck to do well. I'm going to put it in a high B tier for now. Next, we have Garp, D tier. Kinemon. Kinemon is now I don't think this really affects its position a whole lot. I would say that Newgate with the 8K leader definitely would be one of the harder matchups because it wants to play a much slower, much more controlly. The issue is that Zoro still exists. Zoro being a deck is going to rush it down and doesn't really care about things getting rested because he just throws up a whole bunch of cards really fast. I'm going to put Kinemon just below Newgate, though. Still in that B tier. Sanji is C tier. I would have put him in D tier, but he's C tier now. Ivankov really wants to play off of tempo, being able to bounce cards back to deck. It gets the 3,000 worlds. The only issue with Ivankov over the other blue decks is Ivankov. There's so many tools in blue to get hand advantage and keep your hand size up. And Ivankov wants to play with the hand size low. And it just feels very counterintuitive to what the rest of the archetype wants to do. So for those reasons, I'm going to place it in C tier. Magellan was in an interesting position. It was I don't think it got a chance to be explored in this way in OP-03 the way it was in OP-02, but it is kind of a counter Whitebeard. Like if you play Magellan into Whitebeard, you are going to win like 90% of the time. It is that polarizing of a matchup. Now that he loses the matchup against the best deck, I think it falls down to probably D tier. I'm gonna put it at the top of D tier, bottom C tier, top of D tier for now. We'll see how it trickles down from there. Z is a very interesting deck. Black and purple actually synergize so well together, and once you get that 10-drop Kuzan on the board, this deck feels unbeatable. The only problem is that if your opponent has any kind of tempo whatsoever, they just run you over before you can get to the Kuzan. Zoro is probably going to be playing more low to the ground now that the mid-range build has been kind of gutted for the most part. And I feel like that is bad for Z. I'm going to put him at the top of C tier, though, because he still has a lot of potential. There's just something about being able to clear out the whole board without needing to use very many resources. That's just so good. Smoker is interesting. It's a black leader. I would say lost to Zoro, or it loses to Zoro, but I would say it did decent into Newgate. I think Smoker is at the top of B, bottom of A area. We might need like a B plus or an A minus to throw it into. But I think that's probably where he'll fall now. We'll see. We'll see how the rest of the tier list develops. Luffy, now that Newgate is gone, Luffy actually might get a boost in usage. And I feel like being able to play effectively with 11 Dawn, there is a lot of strategies that only work well with Luffy as a leader. So I think he is probably A tier right now. Kid, I'm going to put at the top of A tier, bottom of S tier. Kid did not like Newgate, in my opinion. Kid has a good matchup into especially the low to the ground Zoro with both the Supernova build and the Film Kid build. The Film Kid build, I feel like also does pretty well into Katakuri because Katakuri will try to go for the Big Mom plays, and sometimes you always have the threat of double 12k swing Kid in the late game, and sometimes that Big Mom is not safe because it's getting rid of too many resources and you leave so much up on the board. Plus the ability for Film Kid to just flood the board. I feel like the Katakuri matchup is actually quite good. The Zoro matchup, especially the low to the ground Zoro without blockers, I feel like that is basically just a free matchup for Film Kid and the Supernova Kid. So I think Kid is actually, I think S actually. I think I've talked myself into Kid being an S tier. We'll see if that sticks, but we'll keep going through the list and see what else comes up. Crocodile. Crocodile, I would say, had a really bad matchup into Whitebeard. He does decent into Zoro and decent into... He does really well into Kid. I think he might be an A tier because I'm trying to think of which matchups he would possibly lose. He wins against the Law. He wins against the Zoro, or at least 50-50s the Zoro. I would say because of how many blockers he has, he does decent into the yellow decks. Black decks, I feel like he can because he can bounce back all of their non-KOable blockers, and sometimes I feel like black has a huge reliance on like just sitting behind a couple of Borsalinos. So I think Croc is actually in a really good position. I'd put it just under Luffy in A tier. Kaido, I think, is again in a better spot. The blocker Marcos being able to just revive themselves if you drop the 10 cost Kaido and clear board really is frustrating. The only problem is the 5 cost Marcos still exist. So red matchup is still not going to be looking great. This is a good effective strategy against things like, not Film Kid and not Black. Yeah, it's still C tier. It's like the bottom of C tier, top of Purple. Just really needs some help at this point. It really does. D tier. There's just better options. Zoro is a contender for best deck. Surprise, surprise. The only thing that I think is going to change with this deck is we're probably going to see a more low to the ground build become the more popular. We saw the eventless build that topped a regional with a first and fourth place finishes. And I think that build probably will not be the dominant build. I think there's going to be more innovation as the metagame evolves over time. The biggest thing that Zoro lost is its unpredictability. I would say that prior to this, there was like a mid-range, a couple of ways you could play mid-range, and then a couple of ways you could play low to the ground. And now there's like one half-ish mid-range build that kind of works, and then there is like 2 to 3 variants of low to the ground builds that work. And I feel like it's not as versatile. So as soon as you know what they're doing, you can kind of have an idea of how to counter it. That being said, though, like sometimes just like being rushed down by like 5 swings a turn is just, there's not really a lot you can do about it. So we'll see how it plays out, but I would say that Zoro is in contest for the best deck of this format. So yeah. Next, Law. Law gets a huge win here. So with, and spoiler alert, I think Katakuri is the other one that's up here for a contender for the best deck. But with Whitebeard out of the way, Law now looks very, very appealing. There's not a lot of decks that can deal with his board pressure. It feels so safe being able to search every single turn, just bounce the Bonnie back to your hand, cycle through with a Nami Surge, be able to get 3-4 blockers on the board, and then also swing 3 to 4 times. He didn't quite get that multiple swing factor in as well against Whitebeard, because Whitebeard is a 6k leader, so you have to have that extra Dawn investment on your Zoro. But being able to cycle a Zoro, swing with Zoro, play Zoro, swing with Zoro, bounce Zoro back, play the Law, bounce your Bonnie back, play out the Zoro again, swing again with Zoro for a double hit is really, really effective. And it is so annoying to deal with that kind of poking pressure. I feel like now, especially with Katakuri, I'm expecting Katakuri to rise in usage quite a bit now that Whitebeard is going to be much less viable. And as Katakuri goes up in usage, Law, which is a natural counter to Katakuri, is going to be more valuable. So he is going to be a contender for best deck. I also think Law goes even with Zoro. That might be a hot take. And there is obviously ways that you can build Zoro that counter Law. For example, you could play like more Vistas, more Robin. But then if you overtune for the Law matchup and the Mirror match, then you might lose to the Katakuri that the Vista and the Robin are not very useful against. So I think that Law is in a really, really good position in this metagame as well. I'm going to put him right under Zoro, though. I think Zoro is still a little bit better. Red Green Luffy. I actually have some sauce that I want to lab out with this, but I cannot base his placement based on that. I think he's probably bottom B tier, top of C tier, kind of the same area as Z. But we'll see how this plays out over time. Odin, low tier. Doflamingo. Doflamingo. I feel like Doflamingo might just be cracked. I'm gonna put him in A tier, right next to Croc. I think if you have the Jinbei, he might be. I think with Jinbei, Doflamingo is better than Croc. So you need the Jinbei though. I think Jinbei is like what makes this deck so good. Honestly, being able to cheat out that thing, threaten all of the red decks, because now that red is going to be going more low to the ground, this Dofi is going to be even better, more valuable because you're able to cheat out the Jinbeis, have multiple of those on board. You could even run like the 3000 worlds like Crocodile does, bottom deck there. Like Harutas, I'm assuming that's going to be played a lot more now that we're playing more low to the ground. So Dofi also has great value into the Law matchup. I think Dofi probably even does well into Katakuri just because obviously the big moms are a threat, but you also run a lot of blockers, and Katakuri does not have a lot of removal. So I think Dofi is actually in a pretty solid position overall. Blurple Kaido. Blurple Kaido, I'm going to put, I think, just above Purple Kaido. Blurple Croc. There is some interesting, very stally strategies with Blurple Croc. I think he goes right below Sanji, right about there. D tier. Charlotte Linlin, pure yellow Charlotte Linlin. This is actually a really good deck also. There's an event card, Thunderbolt, that pops a 5k and it has a trigger, and the cost to balance it is that you have to pay a life to activate it. Charlotte Linlin, though, her ability, when you get below 2 life, you're able to take a card from your hand and place it onto your life, like as you're cycling, which gives you the ability to place those Thunderbolts that you accidentally draw and place those on top of your life or at the bottom of your life or wherever you want to, basically wherever you want it to be. And then that allows you to just pop a 5 cost for free, which is like 90% of the good cards. So that interaction alone would put her in A tier. And then also she has the 10 cost Big Mom. So I think she is actually, with the way the current meta is looking, I think she is top end of A, probably. I'm gonna put her right ahead of Luffy. I think this is probably accurate. This might be lower. We'll see. Ace is in an interesting position. The thing that Ace gets is he is able to run Ace, the character Ace, 7 cost rush Ace with the 2/3s is such a powerful card. There was variants of Ace that were not running the 9 cost Whitebeard at all. I don't think those were the optimal build, but that just goes to show how powerful this leader is with its removal. It still has access to like infinite event searching. It still has access to Round Table plus Seaquake. Seaquake is an amazing event. And the stabilization that you get from Double Marco and Whitebeard is not as important to Ace as it is to Newgate. The issue with Ace is we did lose the Radical Beam. We did lose our huge defensive ability. in the form of double Marco. Like being able to have double Marco on the board, it just wins games for so many red leaders. And I'd say Ace is one of the ones that relied on that defensive piece to their game more than most, because he plays heavy removal and then relies on the 2 Marco hits to just kind of like live forever, to be able to hyper efficiently get out of sticky situations. I think Ace probably goes, I would say, bottom of A tier. I think it's worse than Luffy now. I think Luffy has more options available that are still good. I would say that it's worse than these 2 blue decks, and definitely worse than Big Mom. So I think it goes bottom of A tier. I think Kuro is probably C tier. I'm gonna say here. It has access to some things that are kind of nice. Double swinging is always nice. It has access to the East Blue Green cards, which are kind of nice. The double rest, but now that Marco's gone, the double rest for 4 costs is not as powerful. What was so nice about that before was the fact that you could get around double Marco so efficiently. But now you don't have that. That's not even a threat for anybody. So I think middle of the pack of C tier is probably pretty fitting. Arlong is a really fun deck. I think it solidly fits in right in the middle of B tier. It's a little bit less efficient than Doflamingo, because instead of playing from the top of your deck, you're playing out of your hand. It has to be a trigger. So those are downsides, but you are swinging for 7 and you are cheating out a card as you're swinging for 7 every turn. And that's kind of nice. And you also have access to stuff like Cracker, which gives you a free 6k body when you're in lower life, plus double attack when you attach the Dawn and you're lower life, which means you could swing 7k with 1 Dawn attached to your Cracker if you're lower in life for a double attack. And if you attach 3, that makes 9. That makes it really, really efficient at trying to get caught back up, even though you're a 4 Dawn leader. You also have access to all of the East Blue Green cards that are really strong. You have all of those. Like there's a rest anything, like just rest any character. No stipulation on that character's cost, which is really strong. So I think middle of the pack B tier is really where it belongs. The issue I would say with Arlong is its consistency compared to these cards, these decks above it. Nami, I hate Nami. Alternate win condition is strong. Consistency is weak. I'm gonna put it like bottom of C tier. Iceberg, we'll put you at top of D. Rob Lucci. Okay, so Rob Lucci was a anti-Whitebeard deck, right? It's strong into a lot of things. It goes even with a lot of things. Anything that relies on blockers for their defenses, it does pretty well against. So for that reason alone, I think it goes above the blues. That being said, it just struggles in a lot of matchups now. It struggles against low to the ground decks that don't really care if you're popping 1 or 2 cards because they can replace it so cheaply. So like Zoro doesn't care about Rob Lucci. Luffy doesn't care about Rob Lucci. I would say Law has a little bit of a rough time because Law's high end is a 5 cost. So Law might be struggling with the Rob Lucci matchup a bit, plus Rob Lucci swings into it and then just double attacks if you try to block it. So now that I think about it, with the new matchup spread, he might be here, actually, with the matchup spread the way it is, because I'm looking at these above it. Ace probably does fine against Rob Lucci because now we're playing a higher ace count. Blue, I think, beats black in general. I could be crazy for that take, but I think that Crocodile and Doflamingo just bounce everything back, and we don't care about the non-KOable. I think Luffy, if you're playing Luffy like the other reds, He probably is doing well into the black matchup because he's probably playing a little bit more low to the ground. Probably lots of rush like we have in the past. Big Mom, I think all yellow just craps on black. Kid, 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 I feel like is interesting because Kid, you have the downside of him being able to pop everything, but you have the positive of being able to flood the board pretty consistently. So if they're establishing one body and they're exchanging a one body for one body, and they go +1 and you go -1, but you're going +3 every turn, then you'll still go +2 overall, or you'll have a +1 in board advantage every turn, if that makes sense. So I think Kid still ultimately has enough flooding the board that it doesn't really impact him that much, even though you could theoretically pop everything of his. Plus, he doesn't really in the early game, he'll be able to outboard you and then be able to just swing 3 to 4 times a turn. Then in the late game, even if you clear his whole board, he doesn't really care because he's just going to swing at your life twice for 12k. And if you are establishing blockers, you're not popping his board. So you're going to be put in a situation where it's, do I clear the board or do I establish board? And if you're having to make a choice between those, I feel like that Kid is in the pilot seat at that point, and that's not good for black. So I think it's probably an even matchup at the end of the day, but I don't think that it's as bad as black in OP-02 was, because I think OP-02 is a very different playstyle, and I think the film variant of Kid is the variant that will do well into these black matchups, whereas the Supernova build will struggle a bit more. Yeah, so I think this is good placement. Yellow, black, Big Mom. I'm going to put this right about here. Still has access to 10 cost Big Mom. Also has access to Borsalino. And I think that's really the only thing you're grabbing from black. Borsalino and maybe the what is the Sengoku's the 2-cost counter that they have. I think that is also a pretty good card to include. And then maybe the 3-cost blocker that also cannot be KO'd by effects, because yellow doesn't really have any good blockers. But other than that, I think that's all you're grabbing. Everything else, I think, is going to be your standard yellow stuff. And as far as the ability goes, I think the pure yellow Big Mom is just better. And obviously, I think Katakuri is better. So I think that's probably where she'll fall. And last, and certainly not least, Katakuri. I have a lot of bias for this character. This is one of my favorite characters to play, and also one of my favorite in the anime. I think it's going to be the second best in this meta, though. I'm looking at it, and we might have a little bit of rock, paper, scissors here, where Zoro kind of beats Katakuri. Katakuri kind of beats Kid. Kid kind of beats, well, I feel like Zoro and Katakuri are probably even. I think Law beats Katakuri. Law and Zoro, depending on how the build of Zoro is, Zoro can be tuned to kind of play into the Law matchup a bit more. It really just depends, though. It's gonna be interesting. Only time will tell. But I think this is more or less how the tier list will break down. Our top tiers are going to be Zoro, Katakuri, Law, and Kid. Then like the next band of characters that'll see some, like, these will see regional first places. Like I think it is wholly possible for these to see a first place finish in a regional or like a Treasure Cup or any big tournament. I can see these placing first place, definitely topping, and possibly a first place finish from at least one of these. These, I would say, are going to be a little bit more of a stretch. They're a little bit more niche, but the match of familiarity will be a little bit lower because whatever Newgate ends up becoming is going to be something very different from what we see right now. And a lot of people are just not going to be really thinking about a 6K leader anymore, I don't think, because it's just not as relevant. Yeah, I think this is pretty solid, but let me know in the comments below how horribly wrong I am. So yeah, see you guys later.